let's go ahead and move on. This is a really interesting story. We're wanting to try and find an angle to cover this, and this is the way that we could put it all together, which is that the generational divide in wealth and resources here in the United States just continues to absolutely boggle the mind. And I don't really see a way that this ends in a good way. Let's put this up there on the screen. This is from the Wall Street Journal, which did this new analysis. Older Americans flush with housing and stock portfolio wealth are poised to revive spending this year. The subhead is consumers age 65 and older are boosting their spending as Omicron fades. So total household spending has actually sharply fallen in the spring of 2020. However, consumers age 65 and over are increasing their spending very slowly and more so than any other age groups over the last 2 years, according to Visa Incorporated's Index of Credit and Debit Card Spending Momentum, which measures the number of people boosting or cutting their spending. So what's important to note is that all three groups, 65 and over, 45 to 65, 25 to 45, generally considered in the higher echelon of consumers, their spending all dropped at commiserate levels back in 2020. However, older Americans had always been above in terms of their spending and now are actually increasing at a higher rate than everybody else. And what they say in particular is that because this current recession was unusual in that stock and housing values boomed all the while that spending was going down, that those are exactly the assets of which the boomer class has far more than everybody else. And when you consider it in terms of share of population, it gets even more stunning. The number of Americans who are 65 or older increased by more than a third in the decade through 2019. They accounted for nearly 17% of the U.S. population in 2020, a share which will rise to 20% by 2030. And the reason that matters is when you have a disproportionate amount of wealth, and it's not to say that they shouldn't have more because obviously they've had more earning potential, but when you have 10x more than previous generations, and especially when you have the other generation unable to even attain this, I don't see how this can end well, Krystal. You have the older Americans in this country holding all the cards. People have been contacting me, friends who are in a financial situation to purchase property. They're willing to put down 20%, but they are unable to compete because many of the boomers that are also buying property, who are downsizing actually, and while these people are trying to get their first house, they're offering straight cash. I mean, how are you supposed to compete? And the reason they're able to do so is because of their stock portfolios or because they'd sold a previous property and are cash flush in a way that the younger generations just simply have no complete ability to compete whatsoever.
Yeah, listen, if you are already an asset owner, you are doing phenomenal. And if you are a wage earner, you are getting screwed.
Yeah, you're getting screwed.
And since, and we're about to get to some of this data, since millennials have been significantly delayed as compared to prior generations in being able to acquire any assets, most importantly, a home, that means that they are completely left out in the cold. And that's not an accident. That is the structure of our system. I mean, the Federal Reserve has all the capabilities in the world to basically bolster asset markets, which they did extremely aggressively during the coronavirus pandemic, just as they did, of course, during the financial crash as well. And so asset prices, stock prices, home prices, private equity coming in and buying up homes as well, going through the roof, while inflation is giving everyone a pay cut and making them lose money day to day to day. And so you have this, just as we have this massive inequality split in the country, you have this massive generational inequality split of older generations which were able to acquire assets in a reasonable time frame in their lives are now benefiting from that. And if you're a wage earner, you are on a treadmill and you are falling further and further behind.
100%. And let's go ahead and put this millennial tear sheet up there on the screen, this has been kind of a curation of millennial data. Let me go ahead and read this. When you look at how quickly Americans hit major milestones sorted by year of birth, the millennials are easier to spot. The marriage rate for Americans born between 1981 and 1985 did not top 50% until they were between 30 and 32. The oldest baby boomers hit that 50% mark at age of 22. When it comes to children, the age at which most Americans have a child living at home has also risen during the millennial era. It's a 31 or 32 for the 1981 to 1985 crew. The oldest group of boomers hit that at 25 to 26. Most stark is home ownership. It took until 33 to 35 for most older millennials to become homeowners. The oldest group of boomers hit that milestone at 28 or 29. Think about a 5 to 7 year gap in the inability to procure asset wealth.
Yeah.
This is the single worst thing that can happen to you from a financial perspective that compounds over time, leaves you intergenerational wealth, and the ability also in order to take loans based upon the underlying value of your assets. These are things that are completely denied to the common American, millennial American, which requires them to take debt in the form of credit cards, overspend, and also just frankly not live as nice of a life. And the interesting part too is that whenever you look here, the millennials are the most educated generation on record. However, whenever it comes to their ability to earn income and attain assets, they are far behind everybody else. So look, marriage, children, a lot of that is culture. Let's not get it wrong. Religiosity and other has dramatically declined in this country, and a drop was almost certainly going to happen. However,
and education delays
that. And education also delays that. However, if you ask people, why are you not getting married? They say money. They're saying one of the main reasons is I can't afford it. The average wedding in this country costs $20,000. If you ask people, why are you not buying a house? It's not that they don't want one. It's that they can't afford one. So I've always said this, let's see how much of it we can fix based on economic prospects. And then if the level playing field is there and they still don't want to have kids or get married, fine, be my guest. But women will tell you, in terms of all the survey data we've seen, that they want 2.2 kids per household, and they're only having 1.7.
Yeah.
And the reason why is economic constraints. Some of it is childcare on the higher income side, and some of it is I simply can't afford it. I can't afford the diapers. I can't afford all the attendant costs, school, etc. So why don't we fix that part, and then if we need to have a cultural conversation, we can have it.
Well, and on the education piece, there's a couple other factors here as well, because they cite an analyst here that says about 20% of that decline in home ownership among young adults is directly attributable to their increased student loan debts. So costs have gone up insanely in terms of what it takes and what it costs to earn a bachelor's, a basic college education. And that debt is prohibiting a lot of millennials from being able to get their first home. And then the other piece is, on one hand, you look and you're like, oh, it's good that they're the most educated generation, but you also have this college arms race where now, in order to get a, decent, stable job, you have to have a college education that, previous generations may not have needed a college education to do the same work. And so it's not just, it's not an unequivocal good thing that you have that college education arms race, because it does also set, I know a lot of highly educated women who spent a long time going to school and they spent a long time establishing themselves in their career, and then they look up and they're in their mid to late 30s and they want to have kids, and the clock is ticking, and they're having trouble finding the right person, and there's all this pressure on them. So a lot of these things, these trends that you see are not choices, and that's without even mentioning that this is a generation that graduated into the financial crash. And research consistently shows that when you enter the job market during a recession, that impacts your job trajectory, your career trajectory, and your earnings trajectory your entire life. So, that's why millennials have been consistently behind on all of these life milestones. And the fact that they're unable to enter the class of asset owners puts them on a wildly different track than what their parents and grandparents were on. And it also, there's other factors like, prior generations, you got a job, it was stable, you got health care, you got benefits, you got a pension, you were there, you knew what it was, and you were sort of settled for life. With this generation, it's gig work, it's precarious, nothing is guaranteed anymore.
And what's interesting too is that they cite a economist study from 2010 of the long-term large negative effects of graduating in a worse economy and the long-term consequences that can have on you as an earner for your entire life. So simply just graduating in 2008 was enough to offset some of your wages and earning potential by 10 to 20% depending on what exactly your education and skill attainment was. Compare that to the boomers who had the prosperous years of the late 80s and the entire 90s. I mean, you'd have to be an idiot in the 90s to not make money in the stock market. Like, you could put $1 in there and you were still gonna make like $15. Yes, the dot-com bubble, but that didn't erase all of the gains of the early 90s and the late 80s especially. This is not something that people who are our age have ever had access to. We have never had the ability to even compete on that playing field. So all of this is a long way of saying is that some sort of corrective has to happen. I don't know what it's going to look like, but the reason we put generational war in there is I just see increasing animosity between the two sides, and there needs to be some give and somewhere in the government in terms of an agreement on what exactly the end result is going to be.
Yeah, and Gen Z, I think, is going to look a lot more like
Oh, yeah.
the millennial trajectory
100%.
than the older generation trajectory. So they're just not old enough yet to have all that data.
Hey guys, we're going to be totally upfront with you. This is the most perilous time that we have ever operated in.
It is so difficult just to try to sort through the news, but even more importantly, to bring you accurate information as this wave of lockdown and censorship spreads across the nation.
Yeah, look, if you can become a premium subscriber today at breakingpoints.com, you're going to help us build out a vibrant, independent media ecosystem which is free of mainstream pressure. We can't tell you how important that is at a time like this.
Yep, that's right. Go to breakingpoints.com to subscribe. We love you guys and we appreciate you so much.